We're going to take a look at an introduction to e-learning in this video. So let's start with probably the best place, and that is, what is e-learning? There's really no standard definition for e-learning. It's any class that can include the use of the internet to help deliver common functions that happen in a learning environment, like presenting information, guiding learning, and assessment. It goes by a number of different terms. Sometimes it's e-learning, sometimes it's online learning or internet-based learning. It is comprised both of fully online classes and hybrid or blended classes, or where part of the instruction is delivered using the internet and part of it is delivered face-to-face. Now, e-learning comes with its own set of baggage and its own set of issues. So here are some of the common questions. Are online classes as effective as face-to-face classes? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is going to happen in just a moment. But the face-to-face classes have never been proven to be effective. We don't do research to see whether or not face-to-face classes are effective. We just assume that they are. And we make that assumption because it's our common form of delivery. It's what everybody knows. It's what we compare everything to. Online classes have a bad reputation, and there's a reason for that. Early online classes were pretty bad. It's really quite that simple. They were little more than digital correspondence classes. You would read, you would take a test. You would read, you would take a test. Read, take a test. There was no communication between teachers and students. There was no communication between students and students. What we have learned is that the connection that teachers and students make in face-to-face classes is just as important in an online class as it is in a face-to-face class. The other thing is, the reason that that it has a bad reputation is that people often only take one or two online classes. So if you take one online class and it's bad, then every online class you've taken is bad. If you take two online classes and one of them is bad, 50% of them are bad. It's just the law of averages and perceptions. You've had bad face-to-face classes. It's just that you've had so many of them that they average out to being pretty good. So that's one of the reasons that it has that reputation, and that's something that we are constantly fighting against when we are working in e-learning. For people who are teaching e-learning, there's this myth, or people who are teaching online or developing e-learning, there's this myth that you don't know enough, that there's always something that you don't know that stops you from developing an e-learning class. While there are certainly baseline skills that you need, if you had to, you could teach an entire online class with a word processor and an email account. So you can't let this idea that you don't know enough stop you from starting teaching online. Another problem that people have when they teach online, particularly the first time, is they overdevelop. So they put too much content into their classes. The other thing is that online teachers often undercommunicate, meaning they don't spend enough time talking to their students or listening to them or responding to their concerns. And if you had a face-to-face class where there wasn't much communication between teachers and students, then that would be a problem. The same is true in an online class. There are, broadly speaking, two different types of online learning. There's asynchronous learning and there's synchronous learning. Asynchronous is anytime, anywhere learning. You can log in and do the work on your schedule, usually within reason. Usually an asynchronous class has a schedule that you have to maintain. Synchronous learning happens using voice over internet protocol or voice over IP software, where people communicate in real time. People often ask, which is better? And I would say to you that it really matters what problem you're trying to solve. Which brings me to an age-old question in the use of technology in teaching and learning, and that is, what technology is better? So let's talk for a moment about Richard Clark. When we compare two pieces of media to each other, that is called a media comparison study. And typically what we're doing is we're taking the same content and we're delivering it through two different mediums. So we might compare instructional video to stand-up teachers. We might compare computer-based instruction to instructional video. We might compare online learning to face-to-face learning. We have compared all of these things and more. We have compared workbook learning to video learning. We have compared audio learning to workbook learning. We have compared everything to classroom teachers. And you know what we found when we did that? We found no significant difference. Now we're talking about statistically no significant difference. And what that means is that when you look at learning outcomes, they don't change very much. So what we learned from media comparison studies, beyond that we shouldn't do them anymore, is that good instruction is good instruction. People can learn from anything. So that led Richard Clark to opine, well, then media must be like a truck. And Clark said that as long as the truck gets your information from point A to point B, that it really doesn't matter. We should just use the cheapest truck. Now, it turns out that the truck actually does matter. The truck matters quite a bit. If you are moving ice cream in South Carolina in July, you do not want a flatbed truck. A refrigerated truck is very definitely the way you want to go. So just like the type of truck you use to move goods from one place to another matters, so does the media that you use. But because people can learn from anything, what we have to do is we have to look at what we call the affordances of a technology. And the affordances of a technology mean what are the strengths and weaknesses of that technology relative to the problem that we are looking at. Now, the easiest way for me to describe an example for you is the use of a spreadsheet in graphing. So if our goal is to teach people to graph, then we can do that with graph paper, rulers, and colored markers. But if our goal is to teach people the complex relationship of numbers so that we can make changes in real time and see the relationship of one variable to another, a spreadsheet is a far superior tool. So one of the things that we're going to do in this class is to look at what are the strengths of online learning or e-learning relative to the problem. When is asynchronous appropriate and when is synchronous appropriate? And when do we want to use a blended or hybrid approach? Because that's going to allow us to best use the strengths of the technology and to stay away from its weaknesses. And when we're working with the affordances of a technology, that's what we're trying to do. Leverage the strengths, minimize the weaknesses. So there are a couple of things I would like to leave you with here, and that is that good instruction is good instruction. It doesn't really matter how you deliver it. What matters is whether or not you pay attention to the details of it when you're designing and developing it. You have seen Gagne's 9 events of instruction in the past, and that's really about where we want to find ourselves. So if you think about your best face-to-face class, what can you do to translate that into online teaching? So there are 2 things that I want you to remember. One is Gagne's 9 events, and the other is don't overthink it.